Sifu. 0 out of 10. Just kidding. It's not that bad. Sifu is best described as a 3D beat 'em up, with some light roguelike qualities. It is a game that is brutal and just wants to absolutely fuck you in the ass. Every time you die in Sifu, your main character becomes older, but you spawn right where you died. That is until you die at age 70 or older. At that point, they throw you in the grave and it makes you restart the level. You want to beat every level you can at the youngest age you can, because if you start at a level at age 60, that doesn't give you many mistakes to work with. To lower that starting age, you have to go back to the previous level and beat that level at a lower age. That's what the developers of Sifu wanted to be the driving force. To be honest, this system is all style over substance. Sure, it looks cool to see your character age up when you die, and it does mess with your stats slightly by making you have less health as you get older while simultaneously making you stronger. But it is no different than the life system games have been using for ages. My main problem is how Sifu wants to be a roguelike, similar to Hades, while having the structure of a Souls-like game. This hurts the game badly because it forces the game system of Sifu to also be stuck in the middle. Systems like having to go back to previous levels to beat a level with a lower age stem from the roguelike genre. But this game doesn't have the same sense of becoming stronger and stronger each run like those games do. Usually those games have various skill trees, upgrades, or stats you can invest into, making you feel like you're getting stronger while introducing some variety to the gameplay. Sifu does try to implement this roguelike quality, but again does it half-assedly. There are statues throughout every level, and when you find them you can invest into certain stat buffs based on how well you are doing. The problem with the statue mechanic is that it's never properly explained and is convoluted until you start messing with it. Some of these buffs are useful though, but that's all they are, stat buffs. They do nothing to add variety to the game. Sifu also has one very basic ability pool with 20 abilities to unlock. Out of those 20, only a handful, if that, feel necessary to unlock, while the rest feel like straight filler. Then, Sifu wants you to treat each level like an area in a Souls-like game, by having you go through them to face a challenging boss, and giving you a sense of reward from being the boss and progressing. The problem with this is the fact that Sifu is missing out on one half of the equation, the progression. This is because if you beat a boss at age 70, you will start the next level at age 70, and have to beat the rest of the game without dying. Like previously mentioned, the only way to lower that age is to go back to the previous level and try to beat the challenge you just went through again. Part of the reason those challenging fights feel so good in a Souls-like is the sense of progress you feel as a player when reaching a new area. Instead, Sifu takes that away from you, and makes you feel like it's useless starting a new level at an older age. Sifu is not a particularly long game, with only 5 levels. If it wasn't for this artistic need to stick out from the crowd with an unintuitive aging mechanic, the game would probably only take 5-ish hours to get through. That's with some deaths, but I feel Sifu would be better for it. The only thing Sifu successfully pulls from the roguelike and Souls-like genre is the idea that those games want you to master the gameplay, and Sifu does want you to master its gameplay, that's for sure, whether that gameplay is something you want to master or not. Sifu is almost all about its minute-to-minute gameplay. It revolves around hand-to-hand combat while using the environment around you to make the best out of a situation. The hand-to-hand combat is all about the transitions from offense to defense. Both the main character and his enemies have a health bar along with a stagger bar. Every time you hit someone cleanly, it affects both their stagger and health bar. Once the stagger bar fills up, you can choose to go for an instant takedown on the enemy. But this has a chance of failing and putting the enemy into a Super Saiyan-like state. So if you're not feeling that risk, you can just keep chipping at their health bar to take them down that way. You also have a focus meter, which activates your specials. It puts you into this bullet time like effect, and you can perform one of a handful of those specials. It's helpful in tight situations. The defensive side of combat relies upon guarding, parrying, dodging, and most importantly, avoiding. All of these sound somewhat similar, so let me explain them quickly. Guarding is your usual guard in video games. The enemy will hit you while your health takes no damage, but your stagger gauge will start to fill up. Once your stagger gauge is full, if you try to guard, it will break, and that hit you will take will do some increased damage. Parrying is also pretty standard. You perfectly time a guard to stop any damage or stagger intake. Dodging is again pretty standard. Press the right trigger and move the analog stick in a direction to do a quick little skip in that direction. Sifu's main and most unique defensive technique is the avoid. This is where you hold guard while flicking the left stick either up or down to fully avoid the attack and create an opening. The faster you learn this technique, the sooner you realize Sifu isn't quite as hard as it first seems to be, and is actually quite simple. This is where Sifu breaks down for me, because once you figure out the avoid and realize that parrying in this game is so shit, the game becomes so much easier. Why is the parry so shit? Because you can parry an enemy in this game and they can either just create no opening, or they just continue their fucking combo like nothing happened. It makes no sense. So combat will usually look like your character just guarding or dodging, until the enemy throws out their last move of their combo. that you avoid by either just pushing up or down. It really doesn't even matter if they start to fill up your stagger, because you can just dodge away and let it refill. The only reason avoiding is sometimes difficult is because enemies will do the same animations before they throw out their final move, and you have to learn to pick up the tilt for whether they are going high or low on that final move. Don't get me wrong, the fighting in Sifu feels good and looks good, but it really isn't quite all it's cut out to be, and the only variety in fights comes from using the environment around you, such as kicking some chairs into enemies, throwing bottles at them, or knocking enemies into a wall for a little extra damage. Combat starts to become stale and lax when looked at compared to its inspirations. When playing Sifu, you can't help noticing that some inspiration may have come from a small game named Sekiro. Revival upon death, anyone? It's not just that though, it looks like the developers of Sifu looked at the combat in Sekiro and tried to imitate that dance. Problem is they took some of the life that came from the combat in the game. Sekiro's dance is much more intricate. Switching from defense to offense in that game is a much more involved task, and much less formulaic. It has an erratic but rhythmic hum, which keeps the combat from going stale. In Sifu, it's the same song every time with every enemy, even including bosses. That's what leads to that repetitive feeling in combat, not helped by the fact you'll probably replay each level many times, which means you're going through the same dance and most likely the same way, thanks to its aging mechanic. One of the things Sifu gets amazingly right in combat is the looks. You look like a true kung fu master in Sifu when fighting, and every takedown is presented beautifully. Actually, that takes us into one of the best parts about Sifu, the presentation. Sifu's combat may not be my favorite in terms of gameplay, but shit, you look cool when doing it. Sifu's combat looks like they mocap some martial artists and had them duke it out. It has a flow to the animations that just make it look so beautiful, but brutal. I did get to play on PS5, and the sounds with the haptics that come through that controller just make it feel that much better. Not only is the combat presented beautifully, but so is every level throughout the game. Each level is unique and breathtaking in their own ways. The team that made Sifu managed to make every level feel grounded, while also giving it a sense of surrealism. That almost makes it feel magical, but not quite fantastical. It's the perfect mix. The camera work also helps this presentation come to life, such as this one fight down the hall. The camera presents itself as a one-shot like in a film, and it truly makes you feel like the next Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee. The art style of Sifu might not be for everybody, but it is for me. It oozes style and everything about it helps make the martial arts come to life. Sifu's story is also presented in a very cinematic manner, thanks to its sense of style and camera work. The way it adds black bars to the top and bottom of the screen are done so tastefully at all the right times, to really focus you in on what's happening. The story in Sifu is anything too out of the ordinary, besides the coming back to life thing. Slight spoilers here, but I won't go too far into the story, just the basic premise. The story starts off with your master being killed by one of his former students and his accomplices. Your character sees this happen in front of him as a child, while holding the artifact that brings him back to life. So when your main character is killed by your master's former student, you come back to life. Your character then spends the rest of his life training to get revenge for his fallen master. You then take control of the main character who sets out to kill all 5 of them in their respective levels. The story is your basic revenge movie plot, but it works perfectly for this game, and is presented beautifully. You can also learn more about the main enemies, the past history of your master, and the dojo by finding clues throughout every level. They get added to your whiteboard in the main hub. Presentation to me is Sifu's biggest and strongest selling point. It's presented so amazingly that playing through the slog that can be Sifu at times becomes a bit more bearable. But does it make it bearable enough? Sifu is a game that's punishing. It's also a game that becomes much easier once you find out the rhythm to the song and keeps on playing repeatedly. Sifu is a game that's presented beautifully, but it's not enough. It's not enough to save this game from itself and its unique identity crisis. It holds it back in too many ways. It's sad for me to say this, because there's so much potential in Sifu to be something greater than it is. It just never reaches that potential. Don't get me wrong, the combat is fun for the first few hours, but really it does become quite stale. I just wish it pulled more ideas from the roguelike genre. Instead, it pulled the worst part, the replaying of levels over and over again, while leaving all the diversity of the genre behind, like diverse character builds and upgrades. I also wish Sifu didn't forget one half of the equation from the Souls-like genre, the progress, and forgetting that it feels to truly feel accomplishing, almost all the time, punishing players for overcoming challenge. The whole time I was writing this, I was under the impression that Sifu was a game that was surprisingly ununique, because it was pulling from so many ideas without really leaning into any of them, or leaning to the worst parts of those ideas. But I've realized something. Sifu is a unique game. A game that is uniquely mediocre. That's my honest take, and why Sifu gets a 5 out of 10.